The bride insisted I wear white, but when I arrived I realized I was the only one. Every other bridesmaid stood beside me dressed in blue. Can you imagine your best friend orchestrating your public humiliation at her own wedding? I stood there, utterly mortified, but what spilled out next, the truth about why she did it, was a twist so shocking, it redefined betrayal. Claire and I, we were practically sisters, best friends since we were 5, inseparable from the day she moved next door. Even when I went off to college a few hours away, she visited all the time. Our bond felt unbreakable. Then, in my sophomore year, I met Leo. We hooked up a couple of times. Nothing serious, just a casual thing. No real connection. Fast forward to senior year, at a party I introduced him to Clara. And just like that, she was obsessed. She grilled me about our history and I was completely honest. Told her we'd had a fling, but it meant absolutely nothing. I even gave her my blessing to go for it. And she did. Within months they were officially an item. After graduation I moved 6 hours away for a job while Clara and Leo settled down back home. Life got busy, sure, but we still saw each other every holiday. Then last Christmas, Leo proposed to Clara at my family's party. Everyone was ecstatic. Clara spent the whole holiday talking wedding plans, insisting I'd be her maid of honor. But then, she went silent. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. My calls went straight to voicemail. When I finally got her on the phone, she dropped a bombshell. I couldn't be in the wedding because I lived too far away. Too far away. She'd given maid of honor to her cousin, a woman Clara despised. My heart sank. I offered to fly in for everything, whatever it took. She just shut me down. Then I saw on social media she'd had an engagement party, and I wasn't invited. 6 weeks before the wedding, Clara called. A bridesmaid dropped out. Could I fill in? I said yes immediately. A flicker of hope. She explained the bridal party was doing a reverse color palette. Bridesmaids in white and she and Leo in black. I already owned a perfect white slip dress. I sent her a photo. She approved it with a simple thumbs-up text. Wedding morning. Him. I showed up at the venue ready for hair and makeup with the girls. Clara hugged me and for a moment it felt like old times. We laughed, we drank champagne. I thought, finally, everything's okay. Then 2 hours before the ceremony, Clara told everyone to get dressed for photos. I changed in the bathroom. The second I walked back into the room, my stomach dropped. Hard. Every single bridesmaid was in blue. Every single one. Me. I was the only one in white. I stood there, frozen, my brain frantically trying to process what I was seeing. Clara told me white. She approved my dress. I had the text message to prove it. This wasn't a mistake. This was a setup. A brutal, calculated setup. Clara stood center stage, arms crossed, still in her bathrobe. She looked at her cousin, a cold glint in her eyes, and said, "See? I told you she'd do something like this." Her cousin, a snarling tornado, marched right up to me screaming, calling me jealous, desperate, accusing me of being secretly in love with Leo. "Everyone knows you've been trying to steal him," she shrieked. "This white dress. Your pathetic attempt to ruin everything." I couldn't speak. My throat was tight. Clara just watched, a slow, satisfied smirk spreading across her face. Like she'd been waiting for this moment, reveling in it. I tried to explain. She told me white. I have proof. But nobody listened. The other bridesmaids just stared at me like I was some deranged lunatic. Clara's mom walked in, gasped, and started whispering furiously. I fumbled for my phone, desperate to show them the text where Clara approved my dress. But when I opened our chat, the messages were gone. Just gone. She deleted them. My gaze snapped to Clara. "Why are you doing this?" I choked out. Her face, now ice cold, responded, "You know exactly why." Then that sickening smile returned. She told her cousin to get me out before I caused more of a scene. The cousin grabbed my arm, yanking me towards the door. But I yanked back. Hard. "I'm not leaving," I declared, my voice trembling, "until someone tells me what the hell is going on." Just then the door swung open. Leo. He wasn't supposed to see Clara before the ceremony, so the entire room froze. He scanned the chaos, his eyes landing on me, standing there in white, tears streaming down my face. His expression didn't just change, it crumbled. Not confusion. No. It was guilt. Raw, unmistakable guilt. Clara's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a knife. "What are you doing in here?" Leo ignored her. He just stared at me. Then so soft, so sad, he whispered my name. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice barely a breath. "I should have told you." Clara's face went ghost white. "Told her what?" I looked from one to the other, completely lost. "What should you have told me, Leo?" He opened his mouth, but Clara's cousin grabbed my arm again, hissing, "You need to leave. Now." I ripped my arm free. I'm not going anywhere. Leo took a step towards me. Clara shrieked. Stop. The room went dead silent. Then Leo spoke, his voice heavy. There's something you need to know. Something Clara's been hiding from you for over a year. Something that explains everything. Leo took a breath, a shuddering gasp that shook his whole chest. His eyes, suddenly ancient, met mine. He told me he and Clara had been trying for a baby for over a year. Doctors, tests, everything. 3 months ago they finally got an answer. He was infertile. Had been since birth. A medical history thing impossible to conceive. The room went absolutely silent. So quiet you could hear a pin drop or someone's phone buzzing across the room. Everyone was doing the math. If Leo couldn't have kids, ever, then our casual college hookups. They couldn't have resulted in anything. Clara's cousin's jaw dropped. One of the bridesmaids clapped a hand over her mouth. Clara's face transformed from angry crimson to ghostly white in an instant. Then she screamed. A raw, visceral shriek directed at Leo. Why? Why would you tell her this now? Why humiliate me in front of everyone on my wedding day? Her voice cracked, soaring to a high, desperate pitch. But Leo didn't flinch. He said he was sick of the lies. Sick of watching her torture me for something that wasn't my fault or his. He couldn't stand by while this whole charade, built on no reality, continued. Clara grabbed the edge of a makeup table, her knuckles white. Shut up. Get out. You're ruining everything. But he just stood there looking at her with what might have been pity. My brain, it just couldn't connect the dots. Infertility? What did that have to do with me? My mind felt sluggish, stupid. What does any of this have to do with why Clara hates me? Why she cut me out and set me up with this dress? Leo turned to me, his face etched with an exhaustion that seemed to come from his soul, not just today's drama. He said Clara had convinced herself I'd gotten pregnant back in college. That I'd had an abortion and hidden it from everyone. A huge, terrible secret. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually stumbled back a step. No. I yelled loud enough that someone jumped. Absolutely not. We always used protection. Always. I never got pregnant. Never had a reason to think I was. Clara started to cry, then angry, guttural sobs that shook her entire body. She pointed a trembling finger at me. Liar. You disappeared for 2 weeks during spring break senior year. Came back different, quiet. Wouldn't talk about where you'd been. I knew something happened. My mind flashed back. Spring break senior year. I got the flu. A brutal knock-you-flat flu. 2 weeks stuck in my dorm room, barely able to move. Chloe, my roommate, brought me soup every day. Our RA checked on me because I looked so awful. I went to student health services twice for the fever. I spewed it all out fast, trying to make them understand. Chloe can verify it. My RA saw me. I have medical records. And then from the back, Chloe stepped forward. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. She's right, Chloe said, looking directly at Clara. I was her roommate. She was sick the entire break. I brought her soup and medicine every day. She never left the room except to use the bathroom. I was so worried I almost called her parents. Clara spun toward Chloe, her bathrobe flying out. Liar. You're covering for her. You planned this together, she shrieked, her voice thin and shrill. But the other bridesmaids were shifting, glancing at each other. Maya was frowning. Another girl, one I barely knew, stared at Clara like she'd never seen her before. Clara's mom gently put a hand on Clara's arm. Sweetheart, she said, her voice soft but firm, maybe we should postpone the ceremony. Talk about this privately. Figure things out. Leo stepped in again, his gaze still fixed on me. There's more, he said. He confessed Clara had been obsessed with this delusion for months. Convinced I'd gotten pregnant because she couldn't have his children. Spiraling into a toxic mix of jealousy and anger, creating this whole twisted narrative to explain her pain. He tried to reason with her to make her see sense, but she wouldn't listen. She just kept building this fantasy brick by toxic brick until it consumed everything. My stomach churned. I felt nauseous, a sickness that had nothing to do with food or fatigue. My best friend, my sister since kindergarten, had spent over a year harboring this seething hatred for me, all over something that never happened. Something she'd conjured entirely in her own mind. The white dress trap, the deleted texts, the public shaming, it was all orchestrated to punish me for a phantom pregnancy. To justify obliterating our friendship with witnesses to back her up. Clara collapsed into a chair by the window. Her cousin rushed to her side, but Clara shoved her away hard. The cousin stumbled. Clara looked up at me, her face blotchy red, wet and twisted with what looked like genuine raw pain. She confessed she needed someone to blame. That every month, when her period came and she knew she wasn't pregnant, she felt like a failure. Watching other people with babies made her want to scream. The thought that Leo and I had a past, that I might have had something with him she could never have. It consumed her. So she'd manufactured this truth. Convinced herself it was real just so she had a reason for why her life felt so wrong. I couldn't breathe in that room another second. I snatched my purse off the chair and marched towards the door. This time no one tried to stop me. Clara's mom was still cradling her, Clara's face buried in her hands. Leo stood frozen by the window looking utterly lost. The other bridesmaids avoided eye contact, glued to their phones or the floor. I yanked the door open and stepped into the hallway. The cool air hit my face like a shock and I realized how suffocating that room had become. My hands were shaking uncontrollably as I walked towards the stairs. Behind me I heard the door creak open again. Quick light footsteps. Chloe appeared beside me at the stairwell. She gently touched my arm and I stopped. Her face was etched with genuine sorrow, not that hollow, polite sympathy. She swore she had no idea about the dress setup. Clara had told all of them just this morning that everyone else was wearing blue and I was being difficult. If she'd known, she would have warned me. I just nodded, unable to speak, my throat still tight. Chloe walked down the stairs with me silently, just being there. We passed through the lobby where early wedding guests were starting to arrive. A few stared at my white dress, but I kept my gaze straight ahead. In the half-full parking lot I found my car. My fingers trembled as I unlocked it. Chloe waited while I got in. I gripped the steering wheel, desperately trying to make my brain function. Everything that had just happened felt utterly impossible. My best friend since kindergarten, my sister, had nurtured this hatred for over a year, all because of a story she'd invented, a pregnancy that never existed. Then she'd orchestrated this entire humiliation, this public execution to punish me. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it made my chest ache. My phone buzzed, vibrating insistently in my purse. Leo's name flashed on the screen. I declined. Buzzed again. Immediately. Another call from Leo. Declined. Then texts started flooding in. One after another. I'm so sorry, don't leave yet, we need to talk, I can explain, just give me a chance. I flipped the phone face down on the passenger seat and squeezed my eyes shut. A gentle rap on my window made me jump. Chloe. Her face was etched with worry. I rolled down the window. She leaned in, concerned. Are you okay to drive? You look really shaken. Maybe wait a bit. She offered to get coffee to just sit with me until I calmed down. Her unexpected kindness. It hit me like a physical wave. And just like that I started to cry. Not just tears but deep, gut-wrenching sobs I couldn't control. Chloe opened the car door and knelt beside me. She didn't say a word. Just placed a hand on my shoulder and let me weep. After a few minutes the sobs subsided enough for me to breathe again. Chloe suggested a coffee shop down the street. She'd drive. We could get my car later. I agreed. I definitely couldn't trust myself behind the wheel. We walked to her car and she drove the short distance to a quiet, cool coffee place. We found a corner table and Chloe ordered us both iced coffees. When she returned, she sat across from me, a serious look on her face. I need to tell you something, she said. She explained she'd only agreed to be a bridesmaid because she felt deeply sorry for Clara. A few months back, Clara had confided in her about the infertility struggles, and Chloe'd felt terrible for her. But she swore hand on heart she had no idea about any grudge against me or this insane pregnancy theory. Clara never even mentioned me during the wedding planning. Chloe pulled out her phone, opened her messages and turned the screen towards me. A text thread with Maya. She scrolled up, showing me their conversation from that very morning. Maya had texted Chloe saying Clara's behavior towards me seemed really off, that something felt wrong. Chloe had replied agreeing, thinking Clara was acting unhinged. They'd both suspected something was seriously amiss, but had no clue what until everything erupted in the bridal suite. But why didn't you warn me about the dress color? Asked my voice raw. Chloe looked deeply uncomfortable. She said Clara had told all the bridesmaids that morning that I had insisted on wearing white, despite being asked to wear blue. That I was being difficult trying to upstage the bride. And they believed her. Why would Clara lie about something like that? They all thought I was the problem. My phone rang again. Leo's name for what felt like the 100th time. Chloe looked from the screen to my face. Maybe you should answer, she suggested gently. He sounds like he genuinely wants to explain, to fix this disaster. I stared at the screen through another ring. Then I answered. Put it on speaker so Chloe could hear. Leo's voice, rushed and apologetic, flooded the quiet coffee shop. He was so sorry. He'd only learned about Clara's pregnancy theory 2 months ago when she finally confessed what she believed. He'd been trying desperately to get her into therapy to make her tell me the truth. But she refused. Instead, she started planning this wedding humiliation. He admitted he should have warned me, but Clara had threatened to call off the entire wedding if he so much as contacted me. He honestly thought he could fix it before today. He was wrong. His voice cracked. The wedding was officially postponed, he said, most guests having left after Clara's mom announced a family emergency. He needed to meet me tomorrow. To explain everything, to tell me why he hadn't warned me sooner. I'll meet you for lunch tomorrow, I told him, my voice flat, at the diner on Main Street back home. Then I hung up before he could say another word. Chloe drove me back to the venue. I thanked her, gave her a hug, and she pressed her number into my hand. Text me if you need anything, she said. I got in my car, bypassing the hotel, and started the 40-minute drive to my parents' house. The whole way, my mind replayed every single excruciating second. When I pulled into their driveway, my mom was watering her flowers. She looked up. Her eyes went from my tear-streaked face to the white dress and back again. She dropped the hose. No questions. Just a tight hug, and she led me inside. My dad, already in the kitchen, stood rigid when he saw us. Mom sat me down, started making tea, and then I told them everything. Every humiliating, heartbreaking detail. My dad stood up, walked to the old wall phone, and started dialing. I grabbed his arm. Wait. I pleaded. His eyes, usually so kind, were burning with anger. Clara's parents need to know what their daughter has done, he ground out. I shook my head. I need to talk to Leo first. Tomorrow. Before we involve anyone else. My mom, ever the calmer one, agreed. Let's hear the full story before we make calls. Dad slowly hung up, but kept his hand on the receiver almost possessively for a long moment. He turned back. I never trusted Clara's sudden coldness towards you this past year, he admitted. I suspected something deeper was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Mom nodded. I noticed it too. The way she'd avoid family gatherings, make excuses. I just sat there, feeling incredibly stupid for not seeing it myself. Dad hugged me. People going through pain sometimes lash out at the wrong targets, he murmured. It doesn't make it okay, but it explains things. I retreated upstairs to my old bedroom, collapsing onto my bed, staring at the ceiling. My phone kept buzzing with Leo's texts, but I couldn't bring myself to read them. Sleep was an impossible dream. Every time my eyes closed, I saw Clara's face in that bridal suite. The satisfied smirk. The way her cousin had screamed at me. I replayed the past year, and suddenly everything shifted into sickening focus. The uninvited engagement party? Not about distance. Clara had deliberately cut me out. The last-minute bridesmaid invitation? Not a kind gesture. It was bait. For a trap. The white dress setup. Planned for weeks. Months even. She deleted those text messages before I even arrived at the venue. This wasn't spontaneous cruelty. This was calculated. Vicious. Revenge for something that never ever happened. I thought about spring break senior year, that brutal flu. How sick I was. Chloe bringing soup, our RA checking on me, medical records from health services. It was all real. But Clara had seen some photo of me looking tired and concocted this grotesque fiction. She built an entire fantasy, used it to justify destroying our friendship. My stomach lurched. How long had she been plotting this? How many nights had she envisioned my face, humiliated in that white dress? How many conversations had she had with her cousin, feeding that hatred? I finally grabbed my phone, opened social media. And there was the photo she must have seen. From spring break, posted by another girl. There I was, in the background in pajamas, looking absolutely exhausted. As I had the flu. That was it. That was the evidence Clara had used to build her entire monstrous accusation. The next morning, I drove back to the diner on Main Street. Leo's car was already there. I walked in, spotting him in a booth by the window. He looked utterly wrecked. His eyes were bloodshot, ringed with dark circles, like he hadn't slept in days. I slid into the seat across from him. No words were needed. The waitress came, Leo ordered coffee, and I the same. We sat in heavy silence until our mugs arrived. Leo wrapped both hands around his, staring into the dark liquid. Then he began to speak. Clara's grief over their infertility, he said, had spiraled for months. At first she was just sad, frustrated. Then she started getting irrationally angry at pregnant women in public. Coming home from the grocery store in tears because she'd seen a baby. He'd begged her to see a therapist, but she'd refused, claiming therapy was for weak people. About 3 months ago I entered the picture. She told Leo her theory about why they couldn't conceive. She was convinced I'd gotten pregnant by him in college, had an abortion, and hidden it. Leo told her it was impossible. He reminded her he was infertile from birth, that no pregnancy could have happened. But Clara wouldn't listen. She pulled up that photo from spring break, showed it to him. She looks thin and tired, she'd said, because she just had an abortion. Leo tried to explain about the flu, but Clara had already made up her mind. She spent hours online researching abortion procedures, recovery times, convincing herself the timeline matched perfectly. No matter what Leo said, she couldn't shake it. She dug through more old photos, scrutinizing them, claiming my face looked different after spring break, that I was hiding something. Leo showed her my old social media posts complaining about the flu. Clara dismissed them. Lies to cover it up. She even went through our old text messages, searching for proof. When she found nothing, she declared I must have deleted everything. Leo's voice cracked. Watching her spiral, he said, had been horrific. He loved her, but she was becoming a stranger. The worst part, knowing the entire foundation of her rage was medically impossible. He was infertile. Documented. But facts no longer mattered to Clara. She needed someone to blame for her unbearable pain, and she had chosen me. Why didn't you tell me months ago, Leo? When this all started. My voice was barely a whisper. He looked down at his coffee. Clara threatened to call off the wedding if I contacted you. She said if I warned you, she'd know I was taking your side over hers. He admitted he made a terrible choice. He thought if he just gave her time, she'd snap out of it, accept reality. He'd hoped their love would be enough to pull her back from the edge. But instead she just spiraled further. She started planning the wedding humiliation. He said she told him about the white dress setup just 2 weeks before the wedding. That's when he finally realized how far gone she was. He tried to stop her, but she just said it was too late to back out. That she deserved to be exposed in front of everyone. Leo said he should have called me that day. He called himself a coward. He just kept hoping she'd change her mind at the last minute. He was wrong. I stared at him, the question burning on my tongue. Why are you with someone who could be this cruel, this irrational? Leo rubbed his face with both hands, a weary gesture. He loved Clara, he said, but he finally recognized she needed serious help. He told her yesterday after I'd left the venue that he was done enabling her delusions. He'd given her an ultimatum, postpone the wedding indefinitely, and she had to get real treatment from a psychiatrist. Not just a therapist, but someone who could evaluate if she needed medication. Clara had screamed at him, insisting there was nothing wrong with her. I was the problem, she said. And if he couldn't see that, maybe they shouldn't get married at all. Fine by me, Leo had told her. He packed a bag, went to stay with Ben, his best man. This morning, Clara's mom had called him, crying. Clara had finally admitted she might need help. They were looking for psychiatrists specializing in grief and infertility. Leo leaned forward, his gaze intense. There's more you need to know. Clara's cousin, he revealed, had known about the pregnancy accusation for weeks. Not only known, but actively encouraged it. She'd constantly told Clara I harbored secret feelings for Leo. That my friendship with Clara was a sham, and I was just waiting for a chance to steal him. Apparently, the cousin had her own dark reasons. She'd always been jealous of my close bond with Clara. When Clara started pulling away from me, the cousin saw her chance to become Clara's new best friend. She'd fed Clara's paranoia, helped plan the dress setup. She was the one who suggested deleting the text messages. Leo called the cousin toxic, telling Clara she needed to cut contact. Clara had initially refused, but her mom had backed Leo up. The cousin was being frozen out. I leaned back in the booth, trying to piece together the shattered fragments of everything I'd just heard. Part of me seethed with anger at Clara's calculated cruelty. Part of me felt a flicker of pity, knowing she was clearly in profound pain. But mostly I just felt a deep, crushing sadness. Our friendship was utterly destroyed. Even if Clara got help, even if she somehow understood her accusations were false, I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. That white dress setup wasn't a clumsy mistake or a moment of weakness. It was meticulously planned revenge. She'd wanted to wound me in the most public, excruciating way possible. That kind of deliberate, cold-blooded cruelty doesn't just evaporate with therapy. Leo asked if I'd be willing to meet with Clara and a therapist to help her confront reality. To confirm the truth about spring break. I told him I needed time. Right now I was too raw, too hurt, too angry to sit in a room with Clara. Maybe someday. But not yet. Leo nodded, understanding. He thanked me, apologized again for not warning me sooner. I told him I appreciated his honesty now, even if it felt tragically late. Then I left the diner, driving the 6 hours back to my apartment. Over the next week, my phone was a constant buzz. Messages from wedding guests who'd heard the real story. Apologies for believing Clara's lies about me insisting on white. Some felt terrible for not speaking up in that bridal suite. Maya called me directly one evening. She wanted to apologize for not questioning Clara's narrative. She admitted the whole thing felt off, but she didn't want to cause drama. Now, she felt immense guilt for her silence. I told Maya I appreciated the call. I didn't blame them. They were victims of Clara's manipulation too. Maya said other bridesmaids felt the same, wondering if I'd want to hear from them. I told her it was okay. I wasn't angry at them. Over the next few days, Chloe and I texted constantly. She sent me screenshots of what Clara's cousin was posting on social media. The cousin, still venomous, claimed I'd shown up in white, knowing full well it was blue. Said I'd caused a huge scene to ruin everything out of jealousy. Chloe said at least 10 people not even at the wedding were spreading the cousin's warped version. I felt sick reading the lies, but Chloe urged me not to engage. Anyone who matters knows the truth, she insisted. My mom noticed my phone obsession and my upset demeanor. One evening she sat me down. Honey, she said gently, betrayal like this doesn't just go away on its own. Maybe talk to someone professional. I insisted I was fine. But she gave me that look. The one all moms master that says, I know you're lying. The very next morning I found a local therapist and scheduled an appointment. The office was small, quiet. I sat in the waiting room, heart pounding, filling out paperwork. When she called me back, I felt a nervous tremor, but also immense relief to finally talk to someone neutral. I poured out the entire wedding disaster start to finish. She listened patiently, taking notes. At the end she said something that hit me profoundly. Clara's behavior, she explained, wasn't about you at all. It was about her own pain, her inability to cope with infertility in a healthy way. You didn't cause this. You couldn't have prevented it. Clara needed help that had nothing to do with your friendship. I left that first session feeling lighter. 2 weeks later my phone rang. A familiar number. Clara's mom. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something compelled me to answer. Her voice was shaky, tearful. She apologized profusely for not seeing how bad things had gotten with her daughter. Clara, she said, had started therapy 3 days after the wedding imploded. Diagnosed with severe anxiety and depression, triggered by the infertility news. Clara was slowly, painstakingly, starting to accept that her accusations against me weren't based in reality. It was a long, hard road, but she was trying. I didn't know what to say, so I just listened. Then Clara's mom asked if I would read a letter Clara had written as part of her therapy homework. No pressure to respond, she said. Throw it away if I wanted. I agreed, even though a part of me recoiled. The letter arrived 4 days later, a thick envelope. I stared at it for an hour, heart hammering, before I could open it. 6 pages. Clara's familiar handwriting. She started by saying she understood if I hated her, if I never wanted to speak to her again. Then she explained how the infertility diagnosis had utterly shattered her sense of self. How she'd spiraled into this obsessive jealousy, convinced I'd gotten pregnant by Leo years ago. Logically, she knew it made no sense now, but at the time the delusion felt terrifyingly real. She described planning the white dress setup as revenge for something that never existed. She took full responsibility for the cruelty, acknowledged our friendship was over solely because of her actions. She didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't ask me to reach out. She just wanted me to know she was getting help and understood the damage she'd caused. I read that letter 3 times. Part of me burned with anger that a mental health crisis could unleash such calculated malice. Part of me felt a pang of sorrow for the friend I'd lost, clearly suffering. I sat down and wrote a short response. I told Clara I appreciated her honesty and hoped therapy helped her heal. I said I needed space and time before I could even consider any kind of relationship between us. This boundary, I wrote, was for my well-being. It felt right. I mailed the letter. And with it, a strange sense of closure. 3 days later, Leo texted. He and Clara were taking a break, he said, while she focused on treatment. He was staying with Ben, his best man from the wedding that never happened. He thanked me for reading Clara's letter, said it meant a lot to her healing process. I didn't respond immediately. I wasn't sure what to say. The next 3 months blurred into a new routine, a quiet rebuilding. Chloe and I met for dinner twice. She became a real friend, not just a survivor of that terrible day. I joined a book club, started running again. I poured myself into my job, earning praise for a big project. One afternoon, Ethan from my company, a guy I'd worked with but never really talked to, stopped by my desk. He asked me out to dinner. I was surprised. But I realized I felt ready. Ethan and I went to a small downtown restaurant for our first date. We talked about work, families, fun. On our 4th date, I told him everything. The whole raw, insane story. The white dress setup, Clara's mental health crisis, all of it. Ethan listened intently without a single interruption. When I finished, he just looked at me. Anyone who could plan that kind of public shaming, he said, his voice firm, has serious problems. This wasn't your fault. And I'm glad you got out of that situation. His understanding, it was a bomb. We kept seeing each other. Regularly. A few weeks later, Chloe texted. She was visiting for the weekend. I was thrilled to show her my city. We explored museums, tried new restaurants, stayed up late talking. On her last night, she told me Clara's cousin had been caught lying about other things to mutual friends. People started questioning her version of the wedding and she'd gotten defensive. Now she was out of Clara's inner circle. Chloe said it felt like a strange kind of justice. I'd agreed to think about meeting with Clara and a therapist, but honestly, I wasn't sure I could sit in a room with her without utterly losing it. The days that followed felt surreal, like I was moving through someone else's life. Work was a distraction, but nights were a relentless loop of the wedding disaster. My phone buzzed one evening while I was making dinner. A message from Maya. She said she and 2 other bridesmaids wanted to apologize in person if I ever came home. They'd been talking, she explained, after everything imploded, and realized how horribly they'd treated me. I stared at that message for a long time. A part of me wanted to just say, forget it. Your apologies won't change anything. But another part appreciated that they were at least trying. I wrote back, I'd be home for Thanksgiving. We could meet for coffee. 3 heart emojis popped up in response. She thanked me for being willing to hear them out. Weeks crept by as I steadily rebuilt my routine. Ethan and I went out a couple more times. I started to believe I could actually move forward. He never pushed me to talk about Clara or the wedding unless I brought it up. One night at his place, I told him about Maya's message and how nervous I felt about Thanksgiving. He listened as always carefully. Then he said something that genuinely surprised me. It takes real strength, he said, to be willing to hear people out even after they've hurt you. Most people would just cut everyone off and never look back. He was right. And I felt a little lighter. Thanksgiving week arrived faster than I expected. I drove the 6 hours home on Wednesday, my stomach twisting with anxiety the whole way. My parents were thrilled to see me and Mom was already knee-deep in cooking. That night at dinner, Dad cautiously asked if I'd heard from Clara or Leo. I told them about Clara's letter and Leo reaching out. Mom's face softened. She hoped Clara got the help she needed, but added she was proud of me for setting boundaries. Dad just nodded, squeezing my hand across the table. Thursday morning, I met Maya and 2 other bridesmaids at a downtown coffee shop. My hands trembled slightly walking in. Maya stood, rushing to hug me, which completely disarmed me. The other 2 looked genuinely awkward. Maya started first. She apologized for believing Clara's story about my dress. It seemed so out of character, she said, but she'd been so focused on supporting Clara that she hadn't questioned it. The others echoed her, adding their own apologies. One admitted she'd suspected something was off when Clara deleted those texts, but she'd been too scared to speak up. They talked for almost an hour, explaining how Clara had painted me as obsessed with Leo for months before the wedding. They felt terrible for not reaching out sooner. I listened. And slowly my anger began to melt away. These women weren't my enemies. They'd been manipulated just like me. I told them I appreciated their honesty and I held no grudges. We actually ended up talking about other things and it felt surprisingly normal. Friday afternoon, my parents told me something that made my chest tighten. Clara's parents had invited them to dinner. Clara, they explained, was doing much better in therapy. She'd accepted the truth about her false accusations and was working through her mental health issues. Dad said Clara's parents weren't pushing for reconciliation, just wanted mine to know Clara understood the damage she'd caused. Mom added that Clara's mom had cried, apologizing for not seeing how ill her daughter had become. I had no words. A part of me felt relieved Clara was getting help. Another part simmered with anger that everyone expected me to just be okay with what she'd done because she was struggling. I told my parents I needed time. They understood. The rest of Thanksgiving weekend passed quietly. Ethan texted me daily, checking in, asking how I was doing. I found myself looking forward to his messages more than I expected. Sunday morning, before I drove back to the city, Mom pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Are you and Ethan getting serious?" she asked, a knowing look in her eye. I told her I wasn't sure, but I really liked him. She smiled. "I'm so glad you found someone who treats you well." He was right. Ethan was different. He actually listened. He never made me feel dramatic about the Clara situation. He just supported me, letting me process everything at my own pace. December flew by, a blur of work deadlines and holiday preparations. Ethan and I were seeing each other at least twice a week, and I started to feel like this could actually be something real. One night, over dinner, I hesitantly asked if he'd come home with me for Christmas. He said yes immediately, a wide, genuine smile spreading across his face. I warned him about my parents' million questions, but he just laughed. "I can handle it." The week before Christmas, a text from Leo made my stomach drop. He and Clara had broken up. Permanently. She needed to focus on her mental health without the pressure of their relationship. His message was tinged with sadness, but also a quiet relief. I wrote back a short note wishing them both peace. He thanked me, said he was staying with Ben for a while. Christmas Eve. Ethan drove home with me. My parents adored him. Dad spent an hour showing him ancient family photos while Mom finished cooking. That night, after everyone was asleep, Mom found me in the kitchen making tea. She sat down. I'm so glad you found someone who treats you with genuine respect and kindness, she said, her voice soft. I worried about you after everything, but seeing you with Ethan, it makes me feel better. I hugged her. And in that moment, I truly understood how lucky I was to have parents who genuinely cared about my happiness. Ethan fit into my family so naturally. By the end of the weekend it felt like he'd always been there. January arrived, cold and crisp, a fresh start. Chloe texted me with exciting news. She'd landed a job in my city. She was moving into an apartment near mine. I was ecstatic. She'd become a true friend. We met for dinner the night she arrived, talking and laughing for hours. At one point she brought up the wedding disaster. Something positive came from that terrible day, she said, her words hitting me. We built a real friendship based on honesty, not that fake thing you had with Clara. He was right. Our friendship felt solid, authentic, in a way my relationship with Clara never, ever had. One Saturday afternoon in late January, back in my hometown to help my parents, I bumped into Clara's mom at a coffee shop. She saw me first, walking over with a nervous, tentative smile. We talked for about 10 minutes and it was surprisingly warm. She told me Clara was genuinely thriving in treatment, making amends with others she'd hurt. She was learning to take responsibility, not just blame her mental health. I told her I was glad Clara was getting better. We hugged. A strange, quiet sense of closure settled over me. 6 months after the wedding disaster, I received a final message from Clara. She was moving to a different state for a fresh start, wishing me well. She thanked me for setting boundaries, said my letter had helped her accept responsibility. No request for forgiveness, no plea to stay in touch. Just gratitude. I read it 3 times. Then a short response wishing her luck. I meant it. I truly hoped she found peace, but I also knew our friendship was irrevocably over. And I was okay with that. Ethan and I celebrated our 6-month anniversary at the same restaurant as our first date. Over dessert he reached across the table, took my hand. I'm falling in love with you, he said. My heart leaped, but in the best possible way. I looked at him, realizing I felt the same. Our relationship was built on trust, on honesty, everything my friendship with Clara never truly was. He knew the entire messy, awful story. And he'd never once made me feel dramatic or like I was dwelling. He just supported me, letting me process everything at my own pace. I'm falling in love with you too, I whispered. His whole face lit up. A year after that catastrophic day, I sat in my apartment Sunday morning, coffee in hand, reflecting. My life had transformed. I was genuinely, deeply happy. My relationships, authentic. Ethan and I were talking about moving in. Chloe lived 10 minutes away. My parents were proud. That betrayal, as horrific as it was, had forced me to value true connection, honest communication, and healthy boundaries. Real friends don't manipulate, don't plot elaborate schemes to hurt you. They show up. They tell the truth. They support you even when things get messy. I was grateful for the growth that came from surviving Clara's cruelty. It had forced me to figure out what I actually wanted in my life, in my relationships. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a betrayal this profound? What would you have done in my place? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.